A 5-year-old girl sits in a cafe booth, crayons scattered across the table, a butterfly pendant hanging from her neck. She hasn't spoken in 18 months. Not to doctors, not to therapists, not even to her father, who has spent every single day since her mother's death trying to reach her. That pendant? She hasn't removed it once. Not for baths, not for bedtime, not for anyone. But today, a single dad brought his little girl on a blind date. He expected awkward silence. He expected her to keep drawing, ignoring the stranger across the table, just like she ignored everyone else. What he didn't expect was to watch his daughter unclasp that pendant, the last piece of her mother she had left, and place it around a stranger's neck. And then she spoke. 5 words, barely a whisper, but those 5 words, they shattered her father's heart into 1,000,000 pieces and somehow put it back together again. But to understand why those words meant everything, you need to know what happened the day this little girl stopped talking. Before we dive in, if you believe that healing sometimes comes from the places we least expect, stay with me until the end. And if this story touches your heart, that subscribe button is waiting, because stories like this one deserve to be shared. Now, let's begin. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as Ronan Caldwell stepped inside, his daughter's small hand wrapped tightly around 2 of his fingers. The salted anchor smelled like fresh coffee and the sea, that particular blend of salt air and roasted beans that only exists in small coastal towns where the ocean is never more than a few blocks away. Fishing nets hung from the exposed beam ceiling. Photographs of boats and storms and sunsets lined the weathered wooden walls. An elderly couple sat near the window, sharing a slice of pie in comfortable silence. Ronan scanned the room, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was early, 15 minutes early, actually, because if there was one thing Ronan Caldwell had learned in 33 years of life, it was that showing up early gave you time to leave before anyone noticed you were there. And right now, every instinct in his body was screaming at him to leave. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. "This is absolutely ridiculous." Wren tugged at his hand, looking up at him with those wide hazel eyes, her mother's eyes, and pointed toward a corner booth near the back. She didn't speak. She never spoke anymore, but Ronan had learned to read her like a book written in a language only he understood. The corner booth meant she wanted to feel safe, hidden, away from strangers. He couldn't blame her. "Good choice, little bird," he said softly, guiding her toward the booth. She climbed onto the worn leather seat, immediately unzipping her backpack and pulling out her supplies: a thick stack of paper, a box of crayons worn down to nubs, and a single purple-colored pencil that she refused to use for anything except butterfly wings. Ronan slid in across from her, then changed his mind and moved to sit beside her instead. He needed to see the door. He needed to see who was coming. He needed an escape route. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Bev, appeared with 2 menus and a knowing smile. "Ronan Caldwell," she said, her voice warm. "Haven't seen you in here in ages. And this must be little Wren? My goodness, look how big you've gotten." Wren didn't look up. Her crayon moved steadily across the paper. Blue, blue, more blue. An ocean, maybe, or a sky. Ronan couldn't tell yet. We're meeting someone," Ronan said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "A woman. She should be here soon." Bev's eyebrows rose slightly, but she said nothing except, "I'll bring some hot chocolate for the little one. And coffee for you? Please, black. Coming right up." She disappeared, and Ronan exhaled slowly, rubbing his palms against his jeans. He almost left. He actually stood up once, mumbling something about forgetting his wallet in the car, but Wren looked up at him with those eyes, confused, a little worried, and he sat back down. He almost left again 5 minutes later, convinced this was a mistake, convinced he wasn't ready, convinced he would never be ready. And then the door opened. The bell chimed, and Ronan Caldwell forgot how to breathe. The woman who walked in wasn't what he expected. He wasn't sure what he expected exactly. Colleen had shown him a photo, but photos never captured the truth of a person. She was average height, with curly auburn hair pulled back in a loose braid that was already coming undone. Her eyes were warm brown, the color of coffee with just a little cream. She wore a raincoat because this was Oregon and it was always raining or about to rain, and embroidered on the pockets were small blue whales. She scanned the room, spotted him, and smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile. It was a little crooked, a little nervous, real. She walked toward them, and Ronan noticed she didn't hesitate when she saw Wren. Her expression didn't change. No surprise, no confusion, no flicker of, "Wait, you brought a child?" She just accepted it. "You must be Ronan," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was softer than he expected, calm. "Colleen told me a lot about you." I shook her hand, hoping she couldn't feel how clammy my palm was. "Good things, I hope?" "Mostly." That crooked smile again. "She said you're stubborn, particular, and terrible at asking for help. But she also said you're the best father she's ever seen. So I figured the good outweighed the bad." Ronan felt something loosen in his chest, just slightly. The woman turned her attention to Wren, but she didn't crouch down or use that high-pitched voice adults sometimes use with children. She simply looked at her, really looked, and studied the drawing taking shape beneath those small fingers. "That's a beautiful butterfly," she said softly. Wren's crayon stopped. Ronan held his breath. Wren never reacted to strangers. She had perfected the art of invisibility, of existing in her own silent world where no one could reach her. But now her hand hovered over the paper, frozen mid-stroke. She was listening. "May I sit?" the woman asked, gesturing to the seat across from them. Ronan nodded, not trusting his voice. She slid into the booth, setting her bag beside her, and waited. Wren's crayon started moving again, but slower now, deliberate. And when she finished the butterfly, purple wings, delicate and precise, she did something she had never done before. She pushed the drawing across the table, toward the stranger. Ronan's heart stuttered. The woman, Linnea, her name was Linnea, he needed to remember that, accepted the paper with the seriousness of someone receiving a priceless artifact. She studied it carefully, taking in every line, every color, every tiny detail. "This is extraordinary," she said quietly. "You have a gift." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather sketchbook, the cover worn soft from years of use, along with a set of colored pencils in a battered tin case. "May I draw something for you?" she asked Wren. No response, but no rejection either. Linnea began to sketch, and Ronan watched, mesmerized, as something he couldn't explain began to unfold right before his eyes. But to understand why this moment mattered, why a simple drawing would become the first crack in 18 months of silence, you need to know what happened the day Wren Caldwell stopped speaking. 18 months earlier, the Caldwell home had been filled with noise. Ivy sang while she cooked, always off-key, always too loud, always making Wren giggle from her spot at the kitchen table where she sat coloring. "Mama, that's not how the song goes," Wren would protest, her 4-year-old voice full of righteous indignation. "It is now," Ivy would reply, spinning around with a wooden spoon as a microphone. "I'm improving it." Ronan would come home from work at the research station to find them like this, his wife dancing around the kitchen, his daughter laughing so hard she could barely breathe, dinner somehow getting made despite the chaos. It was messy, it was loud, it was everything. They lived in Brookhaven,
a small fishing town along the Oregon coast where everyone knew everyone and the fog rolled in every evening like clockwork. Ronan worked as a marine biologist at the local research station, studying tidal patterns and the delicate ecosystems of the Pacific Northwest. Ivy taught kindergarten at Brookhaven Elementary, the same school Wren would attend in another year. Their house was a two-story Victorian that needed new paint and a new roof and about a dozen other repairs they couldn't afford. But it had a porch swing where Ivy read stories to Wren every night before bed, and a backyard that sloped down toward a creek, and a kitchen with big windows that let in the morning light. It was home. The day everything changed was a Tuesday. Ronan remembered that detail with painful clarity. Tuesday, April 14th. The sky had been gray, but the rain had held off. He had stayed late at the station to finish a report, texting Ivy that he would be home by 7. At 6:47 p.m., his phone rang. It wasn't Ivy's number. It was their neighbor, Margaret, an elderly widow who had lived next door for 30 years and never called anyone unless something was wrong. "Ronan," her voice was shaking. "Ronan, you need to come home. Right now." He made the 15-minute drive in 8. The ambulance was already there. The red and blue lights painted the front of his house in alternating colors, and neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, speaking in hushed voices. Margaret stood on the porch, wrapped in a cardigan, her face pale. And sitting beside her, wrapped in someone else's coat, staring at nothing, was Wren. Ronan didn't remember parking the car. He didn't remember running across the lawn. He only remembered reaching the porch, reaching for his daughter, and seeing the look in Margaret's eyes. "The paramedics," Margaret started. "They said it was her heart, something that was always there, something no one knew about. She collapsed. Wren found her." The world tilted. "Where is she?" Ronan heard himself ask. "Where's Ivy?" "Ronan." Margaret's hand was on his arm, but he couldn't feel it. "Ronan, I'm so sorry. They tried. They tried everything, but she was already gone when they got here." The next few hours existed only in fragments. Paperwork, phone calls, his sister Colleen arriving on a red-eye flight from Seattle, her face swollen from crying. The funeral home, the decisions, which casket, which flowers, which words to put in the obituary. Through it all, Wren sat silent. She didn't cry at the funeral. She didn't cry when they came home to a house that still smelled like Ivy's perfume. She didn't cry when Ronan tucked her into bed that first night, her mother's butterfly pendant clutched in her small fist. She simply stopped speaking. At first, Ronan thought it was temporary. Shock, grief, something that would pass once the initial trauma faded. But days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The pediatrician referred them to a child psychologist who diagnosed selective mutism triggered by trauma. She explained it gently, using words like anxiety and processing and timeline. "Some children speak again in weeks," she said. "Some take months. Some take years. There's no way to predict it, Mr. Caldwell. All you can do is create a safe environment, avoid pressuring her, and wait." Wait. As if waiting was easy. As if watching his daughter retreat further and further into silence wasn't slowly killing him. Ronan learned to adapt. He learned that Wren's drawings were her new language. A sun in the corner meant she was having a good day. Rain clouds meant she was thinking about her mother. A butterfly, always purple, always with delicate wings, meant she was thinking about the pendant. The pendant. Ivy had worn it every day of their marriage. A simple silver butterfly on a thin chain, a gift from her grandmother. The night after the funeral, Wren had taken it from Ivy's jewelry box and put it around her own neck. She hadn't removed it since. Not for baths, not for doctor's appointments, not when the clasp irritated her skin and left small red marks. The pendant was her connection to her mother, and Ronan understood that taking it away would be like losing Ivy all over again. So he let her keep it. He let her keep her silence, too. even though it broke his heart every single day. Colleen moved in to help, working remotely as a graphic designer, handling school pickups and grocery shopping and all the small tasks that overwhelmed Ronan when he was barely keeping his head above water. "You're doing great," she told him one evening, finding him sitting on the port swing at midnight, staring at nothing. "Ivy would be proud of you." "Ivy would have known what to do," he replied. "Ivy always knew what to do." "No one knows what to do, Ronan. You just do it anyway." He tried. He learned to braid Wren's hair while flipping pancakes on the stove. He learned to tie her shoes while answering work emails in his phone. He learned to read her bedtime stories, changing his voice for every character, just the way Ivy used to do. He learned to do everything with one hand, it seemed. But the one thing Ronan couldn't do, no matter how hard he tried, no matter how many books he read or therapists he consulted or prayers he whispered into the dark, was make his daughter speak again. Months passed. A year. 18 months. And still, Wren's silence remained.
The idea came from Colleen, because of course it did. Ronan was sitting at the kitchen table one evening, reviewing data from the research station, when his sister appeared with 2 cups of tea and that look on her face. He knew that look. It meant trouble. "No," he said before she could speak. "You don't even know what I'm going to say. I know that look. Whatever it is, the answer is no." Colleen sat down across from him, sliding one of the cups in his direction. "I met someone." "Good for you." "Not for me, you idiot, for you." Ronan looked up. "Absolutely not." "Her name is Linnea Ashford. She's a children's book illustrator. She just moved here from Minneapolis about 6 months ago. She's kind, she's smart, and she spent 3 years working as an art therapist for kids before switching careers." "I'm not interested." "Ronan, I said no." Colleen leaned back in her chair, studying him with the particular intensity only a younger sister could manage. "It's been 18 months. I'm aware. Ivy wouldn't want you to, don't." His voice came out sharper than he intended. "Don't tell me what Ivy would want. You don't get to do that." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Colleen spoke again, softer this time. "I'm not saying you need to replace her. No one could replace Ivy. But you're 33 years old, Ronan. You have a daughter who needs to see that life moves forward, that love is still possible after loss." "She doesn't even talk," Ronan said. "How am I supposed to explain dating to a child who hasn't said a word in 18 months? Maybe you don't explain it. Maybe you just let her see it. Let her see that her father is still capable of connection, of hope." Ronan shook his head. "It wouldn't be fair to whoever I dated. I'm a mess, Colleen. I have a silent 5-year-old, a dead wife, and a house that's falling apart. What woman would sign up for that? Linnea might. You don't know that. I know she asked about you." "What?" "I met her at the craft fair in Seaside last month. We got to talking. I mentioned my brother, the handsome marine biologist with the sad eyes and the incredible little girl. She asked questions. She seemed interested." "You had no right." "I had every right. I'm your sister. It's my job to meddle." Despite himself, Ronan almost smiled. Almost.
"Just coffee," Colleen pressed. 1 hour. If it's terrible, you never have to see her again. But if it's not terrible, maybe that's something worth exploring." "And what about Wren? You'll watch her?" Colleen hesitated. "Actually, I was thinking—" "No. You didn't let me finish. I don't need to. Wren isn't ready to be left with a babysitter she doesn't know. She's not ready to be left at all." "Then take her with you." Ronan blinked. "What?" "Take Wren on the date. Bring her crayons. Let her draw at the table. If Linnea can't handle that, then she's not the right person anyway. But if she can," Colleen shrugged, "maybe it'll be good for both of you." It was ridiculous. Taking a child on a blind date? That wasn't how these things worked. That wasn't— But even as he formed the objections in his mind, another part of him was considering it. Wren had been his constant companion for 18 months. They did everything together. Grocery shopping, beach walks, doctor's appointments. She was his shadow, and he was her anchor in a world that had become terrifying and unpredictable. Maybe bringing her wasn't so crazy after all. "If I agree to this," he said slowly, "and I'm not saying I'm agreeing, but if I did, Wren comes with me, non-negotiable." Colleen's face split into a grin. "Deal. 1 hour. 1 hour. And if it's terrible, you never bring this up again. Scout's honor." Ronan sighed heavily, already regretting the decision. Fine, set it up. 1 week later, he found himself standing outside the salted anchor, his daughter's hand in his, wondering what on earth he had gotten himself into. Back in the cafe, Ronan watched in amazement as Linnea's pencil moved across the page. She wasn't just drawing, she was creating something specific, something intentional. Her hand moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years perfecting their craft. When she finished, she turned the sketchbook around and slid it across to Wren. It was a little girl, brown hair, hazel eyes, standing in a field of wildflowers. In her hand, perched delicately on her finger, was a butterfly. Wren stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked up her purple pencil and began to draw. Ronan watched, barely breathing, as his daughter created a response. Another butterfly, this one larger, flying above the field. When she finished, she pushed the paper back to Linnea. Linnea studied it carefully, nodded, drew something else. This continued for nearly an hour.
Back and forth, the drawings crossed the table like letters in a conversation neither of them needed words to understand. Linnea drew a small house by the sea. Wren added a porch swing. Linnea drew a woman with flowers in her hair. Wren drew a sun behind her. At some point, Bev brought their drinks, coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for Wren, but Ronan barely noticed. He was mesmerized. He had spent 18 months trying to reach his daughter, 18 months of one-sided conversations, of reading drawings like tea leaves, of hoping and praying that today would be the day she finally spoke. And here was a stranger, someone Wren had known for less than an hour, communicating with her in a language Ronan had never thought to try. "You're very good at this," he said to Linnea, his voice rough. She looked up, seeming almost surprised that he was still there. "At drawing?" "At this," he gestured vaguely, connecting with her. "I spent 3 years working with children who couldn't or wouldn't speak. Art therapy. Most people think communication requires words, but it doesn't. Sometimes the deepest conversations happen in silence." Colleen mentioned that, the art therapy. "Is that why you agreed to meet me? Because you thought I could fix her?" The question was direct, but not accusatory, just honest. Ronan shook his head. "I agreed because my sister wouldn't stop bothering me until I did, and I brought Wren because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because I'm not ready to have a life that doesn't include her. She's been through enough. I'm not going to pretend she doesn't exist just to make a date more comfortable." Linnea smiled, that crooked, imperfect smile. "I think that's the best thing you could have said." "Really? Really? Do you know how many people treat children like inconveniences, like obstacles to work around? The fact that you brought her, that you made her part of this, that tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Ronan felt heat rise to his cheeks. He wasn't used to compliments. He wasn't used to any of this. "Can I ask you something?" Linnea asked. "Sure." "The butterfly drawings, they mean something, don't they?" Ronan glanced at Wren, who was absorbed in her latest creation, a garden full of flowers and butterflies, more detailed than anything he'd seen her draw before. "My wife wore a butterfly pendant, every day, a gift from her grandmother. After she passed, Wren took it. She hasn't taken it off since." Linnea's eyes flickered to the silver chain visible around Wren's neck. "I see. The butterflies in her drawings, I think they're how she remembers her mother, how she keeps her close. That's beautiful. It's heartbreaking. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, I suppose they weren't.
The afternoon light shifted, turning golden as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Their coffee cups sat empty. The elderly couple by the window had left, replaced by a group of teenagers comparing homework. Ronan checked his watch and felt a strange pang of disappointment. I should probably get her home. It's getting close to dinner time. Linnea nodded. Of course. He started gathering Wren's supplies. Crayons back in the box, papers stacked neatly, purple pencil tucked safely in the front pocket of her backpack. Maybe Colleen was right, he thought. Maybe this was something worth exploring. Maybe... And then, Wren did something she had never done before. Ronan froze, his hands still holding Wren's backpack. His daughter had stopped gathering her things. Instead, she was sitting very still, her eyes fixed on Linnea across the table. Slowly, deliberately, Wren reached up to her neck. Her small fingers found the clasp of the butterfly pendant. Ronan's breath caught in his throat. Wren? Sweetheart, what are you... The clasp opened. For 18 months, that pendant had not left her neck, not once. Not for baths, or bedtime, or doctor's appointments. When teachers at school had asked her to remove it for safety during gym class, she had cried, silent, heaving sobs that had prompted them to call Ronan at work. The pendant was her mother. The pendant was her lifeline. The pendant was the one thing she had left. And now she was holding it in her small hands, staring down at the delicate silver wings. Linnea sat motionless, seeming to sense that something significant was happening. The cafe had grown quiet. Even the teenagers had stopped their chatter, perhaps sensing the shift in the air. Wren stood up on the booth seat, balancing carefully. She leaned across the table, and she placed the butterfly pendant around Linnea's neck. Ronan couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except watch as his daughter, his silent, wounded, beautiful daughter, clasped the necklace and sat back down. Linnea looked down at the pendant, her eyes wide. Her hand came up to touch the silver wings, trembling slightly. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick, "I can't take this. This is yours. This belonged to your mama." Wren shook her head, firm, certain. The silence stretched, heavy with something none of them could name. And then, for the first time in 18 months, Wren opened her mouth. The words came out raspy, whispered, rusty from disuse, like a door being opened after years of being closed. But they came. "Mama would want you to have it." 5 words. 5 small, broken, impossibly beautiful words. Ronan's vision blurred. Tears spilled down his cheeks before he could stop them, before he even realized he was crying. He pulled Wren into his arms, crushing her against his chest, his body shaking with sobs he had held inside for 18 months. All the grief, all the fear, all the desperate, aching hope. "I'm here," he choked out. "I'm here, little bird. I'm right here." Wren's arms wrapped around his neck, her small body relaxed against his, not the tense, guarded posture she'd carried since her mother's death, but something softer, something released. Across the table, Linnea sat frozen, one hand pressed to the pendant, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Bev, the waitress, had stopped mid-step, coffee pot in hand, watching with shining eyes. The elderly couple who had returned for their forgotten umbrella stood near the door, holding hands, the husband dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. No one spoke. No one needed to. 18 months of silence, shattered by 5 whispered words in a cafe that smelled like coffee and the sea. The months that followed weren't a fairy tale. Wren didn't suddenly become a chatterbox. She was still quiet. She would always be quiet, the doctor said. Some children simply were. But she spoke when it mattered.
She said good morning to her father. She said thank you to Colleen. She said Linny when Linnea came over for dinner, which became a weekly occurrence, then twice weekly, then nearly every day. Ronan and Linnea took things slowly. Coffee dates became dinner dates. Dinner dates became walks on the beach, Wren running ahead of them to collect shells while they talked about everything and nothing. Linnea showed him her studio, a small converted garage behind her rented cottage, walls covered with illustrations of children and animals in magical forests. He showed her the research station, explaining tidal patterns and marine ecosystems while she listened with genuine fascination. She never tried to replace Ivy. She never tried to rush Wren's healing. She simply showed up, day after day, with patience and warmth and that crooked, imperfect smile. The first time Wren called her Linny instead of just pointing, Ronan nearly collapsed. The first time Wren voluntarily hugged her, Linnea cried for 20 minutes. The first time Wren asked if Linny could come to her school art show, actually asked with words, unprompted, Ronan knew that something profound had changed in their little family.
They were married the following spring. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends gathered at the harbor where Ronan had spent so many evenings watching the fishing boats return. The boats themselves were decorated with ribbons for the occasion, their captains having insisted when they heard the news. Wildflowers from the local florist, the same one who had done Ivy's funeral, now creating something for life instead of death, lined the dock. Wren served as the flower girl, but she refused to carry petals. Instead, she walked down the makeshift aisle, releasing paper butterflies she had made herself, dozens of them, painted in every color imaginable, fluttering in the ocean breeze. When Ronan said his vows, his voice broke 3 times. When Linnea said hers, she looked not just at him, but at Wren, including her in every promise. I vow to love your father with everything I have, but I also vow to love you, Wren, not as a replacement for the mother you lost, but as someone new, someone who will show up for you every single day for the rest of my life. Your mama raised an incredible little girl, and I promise to honor her memory by helping you grow into the even more incredible woman you're going to become. Wren smiled and said, clear as a bell, I love you, Linny. The butterfly pendant hangs in Linnea's art studio now, not around her neck. That felt too permanent, too presumptuous, she said. Instead, she mounted it on a small hook above her drawing desk where she can see it every day. Sometimes, when Wren visits after school, she touches it gently. Sometimes she talks about the memories it holds, her mama's laugh, her mama's off-key singing, the way her mama used to dance around the kitchen with a wooden spoon. Sometimes she just smiles and goes back to her coloring. Ronan watches from the doorway during these moments, his heart full of something he thought he'd never feel again. It's not the same as what he had with Ivy. It never could be. But that's okay. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean replacing what was lost. It means finding a way to carry your grief forward alongside the new love that grows in its cracks. A single dad brought his little girl on a blind date, expecting nothing. Her reaction changed everything. Not because it fixed what was broken, but because it showed them both that even after the darkest silence, there can still be words, there can still be connection, there can still be love. If this story reminded you that healing doesn't follow a timeline, if it made you believe that love can find us when we least expect it, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever witnessed a moment that changed everything? A single second where everything shifted and nothing was ever the same. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who might be sitting in their own silence, wondering if they'll ever find their way out. And if you haven't already, join the Soul Tales family. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because there are so many more stories waiting to be told. Stories of heartbreak and hope, of loss and love, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Until next time, take care of your heart.